Hello and welcome back to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 94. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons, and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. They truly don't. And today you're going to get an inside look at paranormal investigation tips that you can use for communicating with spirits and the types of trigger objects that they enjoy interacting with. So to get us started today, sometimes spirits need to get to know you first before they will communicate. They need to observe you. They need to observe your personality and how you interact with the environment that they are living in. And I found this out when I worked as a paranormal tour guide for around about 18 months. Some spirits are shy, and at the other end of the scale, some will push or trip or poke you or even swear at you through some of the paranormal investigation devices because they simply don't want you there, or you're being disrespectful, or they just aren't in the mood to communicate. I always use this as an example. Imagine that you're lying in bed minding your own business. Maybe, watching TV, reading a book on your phone, and a bunch of random people with flashing devices, flashing noisy gadgets, waltz into your bedroom and start nosily waving their devices about saying, come out, talk to us, we know you're here. You would be really annoyed too. Like seriously, it's an invasion of spirits' privacy. One thing I've always found that works, that sort of breaks the ice, you might say, is that when I enter properties to do a paranormal investigation or I go into a property that feels a bit weird, I might just be visiting someone, or I could just be in a location for, who knows what reason. I get around lots of different places. I always ask permission to enter the property. And I let any beings that might be present, including the dark and the demonic beings, I always let them know why I'm there and what I'm doing. And that's a sort of a level of respect. I mean, some people find that weird, but I find it works. I find it opens the door. When you're working with spirit entities, they need to know you're respectful and you're coming into their place to communicate with them. And it kind of just makes them feel more at home with you, basically. And another thing, always be yourself when you're doing your paranormal investigations. I can't stipulate this enough. It is really, really important. Don't pretend or put on some egocentric facade to mimic some fancy paranormal investigator that you've seen on YouTube or, in the investigation shows that you see on TV because you think it's cool. Because I have to tell you, it's not cool, and spirits really dislike fakes, and they will simply choose to not interact with you. I've been in places, and I'll give the example of an old hospital here in Tasmania. It's not used as a hospital anymore. It is simply, I wouldn't say it's an abandoned building. It is used for a few different purposes. But there are a lot of spirits there. They're just going about their job. It is a workplace. So when you go into a location like that, you have to have respect for the building and what it was. Because a lot of the spirits there are still at work. They're still doing their job. They're just doing their thing. So they will respect you more if you ask permission to enter and if you're being yourself and you respect the building. I have very loud, clompy boots, big workman boots, and I have a very loud voice, as you may be able to tell, and I'm quite extravagant. It's just my nature. And I have to tone that down a little bit. As much as I've said be yourself, you've still got to be respectful of the location. And I got told, shh, when I was with my friend. She can see the spirits more than me. And she said, look, they're doing that shush thing. You're making too much noise. And I instantly apologised. I said, oh, look, I'm sorry. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to be here. And I will calm down and I will respect your workplace. So everything that I share with you, I've gone through myself pretty much. And I can go, oh yeah, that's the way to not do it. And then I've used different approaches which have worked much better. They really, really have. So like I was saying, I get sidetracked quite often, as you will know. I went into this old hospital here in Tasmania with a friend of mine who lives in the town. Now, she does paranormal investigation tours there, and sometimes she will let the building out to other paranormal investigation groups who want to go in and do their own investigation. Well, she let in a group of young men one night, and they set up all their gear. They had all the fancy equipment. Like, they set up a camera on a tripod in the theatre overnight. The theatre in that hospital is still very active. You're only allowed in there for like 5 minutes before they will shush you out pretty quickly. Anyway, they had all their equipment set up, and they had the music devices that when spirits walk past, they sort of trip the field, the energy field that's around the device, and it sets off the music box. Well, these young men, they set up their equipment overnight. They had all their cameras running. They were very professional about what they were doing, but their approach wasn't professional. The tone of voice and the way that they interacted with the environment was like, come out and show yourselves. We know you're here. Come and interact with us. And spirits go, nah, I'm not interacting with them. I'm just going to stand here and watch them look like fools. So here waltzes Anna. In my goofiness, I come into this hospital with my friend on another occasion, and I got lost in that hospital that night. I'm sort of wandering around in the dark, can't find my way, and I'm just being myself. And the spirits were interacting with all our devices. They thought I was so funny. And like my friends going, they're laughing at you. I can see them, they're laughing at you. It was seriously the funniest night ever, seeing me wandering around this hospital in total darkness, and all I had was my phone light, and I didn't know the layout of the hospital, so I kept getting lost and going in the wrong directions, and all the spirits, like the man in the x-ray room, were following me. The spirit children were out of bed, and when they shouldn't have been, they got into trouble. But they were following me around the hospital, giggling and laughing, and some of the staff were like, oh, why is she here? But I was just being myself, and I got lost, and we had a bit of fun. So be yourself if you're going into these environments. Don't be frightened, don't be afraid, and don't go into ego or pretend to be someone that you're not, because spirits and the dark entities can see straight through you. So let's look at some of the types of trigger objects that you can use when doing paranormal investigations. Now, I'm going to give you some examples today related to specific types of locations to give you some ideas about what I've seen work and some of the triggers that just didn't work. The most important thing, the number one thing on the top of the list, leave out positive objects that are relevant to the time period and the location. It is so, so important. And it's really common sense. You don't want to trigger spirits in a negative way, especially in a mental health institution or in an old hospital or anywhere where they might have experienced negative happenings in their lives. Do in-depth research. It really is fun to research places before you go. You're not looking at what other people, sort of what experiences other people have had there. You're looking at the history of the building. And look at photos of the residents. Take time to look at the items that they may be holding, looking at what is around them that they may be missing in spirit form. Because, the way I'm saying that is because when I worked at the abandoned mental health institution where I was a tour guide and we used to take people around some of the buildings at night, we found that in the male criminally insane ward, the male spirits there weren't always welcoming. They just simply weren't. You've got to remember, they are people that had mental health issues. And some of them go right back to convict times, which is sort of to maybe 300 years ago. And they just simply don't want to communicate with you. They don't enjoy trigger objects. But there are some, we had so much fun there with some of these guys. They were so lovely. They loved using trigger objects. They loved seeing things from their time, such as decks of playing cards, a checkerboard with the pieces sort of all set out, a tobacco pouch, and a rollie. That was quite popular. Now, you might think, why would men in a criminally insane ward get excited about a rollie and a tobacco pouch? Well, occasionally they were allowed to have a cigarette. And I know this because when I worked for the lady when I was a tour guide, she got me to do some research about the building. And we were looking for things. Now, what can we use as trigger objects to help these spirits relate to the people that are coming on tour that would like to meet them, maybe interact with them, just get a feel for the place. We found that the tobacco pouch and the rollie worked really well, and the deck of cards worked well. And we would sometimes put out a small bottle of rum. Now, you can imagine the spirits, when they were living residents, they weren't allowed to have alcohol, which is pretty obvious. But the staff that worked there, the nurses and the orderlies and the porters and the doctors, they would have had alcohol, whether it be wine, rum, brandy, sherry, whatever it is. So we would put out this little bottle of rum. Now, sometimes we got interactions with the rum, but most of the time we didn't. And it's hard to say, unless you actually see the spirits with your psychic senses, whether it is the staff or the residents actually activating the rum. Now, how do I mean activating the rum? I should have stipulated this earlier. When we would put out the trigger objects, such as decks of playing cards, the checkerboards and the tobacco pouch, we would put these little light balls. They're like a cat toy. You'll see them on eBay and all these other sites. They're like $10 now. And years ago, they're only like $2 or $3 each. But when people cottoned on, they were using for paranormal investigation equipment, up went the prices. But anyway, these little balls have a light-sensitive device in them. And they're about the size of a ping pong ball. You push the little button on the top, which activates the battery. And if you put it in a location next to, say, the deck of cards, and a spirit is trying to touch the cards, they might set off this little light ball. Now, it sounds a bit corny, but it really does work. And some of the spirits like the light balls, some of them don't like the light balls. Because you've got to remember, if I'm using this example of the abandoned mental health hospital here in Tasmania, it used to be a convict building beforehand. Some of these people haven't seen electricity, so it can be a little bit scary for them. But others are like, wow, we can make that move. And we used to get some really amazing triggering of those light balls because they're not really offensive. They are a little bit bright, but there's no loud sounds and they don't really do anything else other than flash their light. One night we got quite excited because we had one roll about 30 centimetres across the floor and we did all the debunking. There was no breezes, there was no one moving when that ball actually moved, so there was no vibrations on the floor. The floor was level, the ball had sat there all night and then all of a sudden it just rolled about 30 centimetres and we're all like, yay, it was so exciting. Now, the lady spirits in the criminally insane ward, they were separated from the males. They were a little bit elusive. And we tried trigger objects like chocolate, makeup cases, magazines, all the things that you would think females might be drawn to. Now, the tour operator, what worked for her, she was so lovely. She used to play old-time music, or sometimes she'd put ABBA on her phone. She'd have ABBA songs playing while we were sort of setting up for the night's tour, and she'd be singing and dancing, and the ladies would have loved that. And how I know is because when we had our groups of people, we would go into particular rooms in that location. And one of the other tour guides who had a good singing voice, not me, can't sing, don't do it. She would sing them old-time songs like Daisy, Daisy. I can't remember the rest of it, but you might know the song I mean. And we would get interactions with these little light balls or some of the other gadgets that we had that had flashing red lights on the front, which were EMF detectors. So when a spirit would walk past the field, it would trigger the light to flash a little bit. So we'd go, aha, there's someone there. They like that song. So it was really exciting to discover what the spirits liked. And you also learn along the way things that they don't like. But we found that music was something that everyone could relate to on some level, and it really did lighten the mood. One thing that a friend of mine suggested, now she's a mental health nurse, she suggested old-style dolls wrapped in hand-knitted blankets of the time. Now, she thought that that would be comforting for the ladies, as she knew, because she'd actually worked at this location when it was an active site. It was part of her training when she was learning her psychiatric nursing. She said that many of the women may have had children, or they may have lost babies before or while in the institution. And having that little baby type figure wrapped in a blanket, that might have brought them some comfort in their spirit life. Now, on that same site, there were many levels of spirit people. In one of the buildings, there was lots of children spirits. Now, children are really fun. Like in spirit form, they're just like kids. They're just like living children in their bodies. We had trigger objects such as books, board games, card games, wooden toys, dolls and teddy bears. Like, these are really timeless objects. Kids love them. And there was one specific room in another location on that site that was set up with the old-time fashioned stamps. You know, you got the ink pad and you got the stamp and you could make a little picture on a piece of paper. Old-time toys that they had in this particular room that belonged to a young girl that the tour owner, she knew that this young girl had been there because she'd done the research and she found some names. And the girl's name had also come through on the spirit box, and some of the psychics that have gone to that site had also heard this little girl's name. And we had many memorable interactions with the spirit children there, and they would look forward to our visits there every time. Now, in old jails, I can give this as another example because we've got an old jail here that's about half an hour drive from my house. It's the Richmond jail here in Hobart. It's another convict jail. Now, I've sat and thought about what sort of items could I take that the spirits might like to interact with. Now, I had a very small bottle of rum. This is the one that I used to take to the other site. And I actually took that with me. And I took a deck of cards and some handmade raspberry drop lollies from the local lolly shop that's in Richmond. Now, the lollies weren't really a hit. I thought they might be. So this is where you've got to play with it a bit. You've got to find out what the spirit's like. Most of the time, they just want to interact with you. They just want to spend time with you, get to know you. If you're the right sort of person and you present yourself in a respectful way, they will follow you round, they'll tug on your clothes, they might lift your hair, like happened to a friend of mine one day. It was so funny. I was talking to her, and all of a sudden, the back of her hair lifted up for about 3 seconds, and it was so funny. I just went, Did you feel that? And she's like, yes. Spirits really do love having a giggle with us. Now, in this jail, I found that the lollies weren't really a hit, but the rum and the cards were. And one spirit, who we called a javelin man, which was a technical term for a convict that had been given a guard level of job in the jail. He followed me and my friend all around the jail when we were there visiting one day. We're just having a look around. It's a very historic site. It's lots of information, lots of interactive information that you can learn about the jail, about the bakery and the solitary cells in the original jail building. Now, this javelin man, he followed us back to my house. And spirits will do that. If you ever find that happens to you, you just say to them, can you please return home? Can't stay here. This is my house. You're affecting the way that I feel, or I didn't sleep very well last night. I know there's spirits here in the house. Can you please go back to your home? Remember, respect, they will honour. I quite often say to spirits, your energy drains my energy and I feel tired and I can't function properly. Can you please go back to your site? And they will do that for you because you've been polite and explained to them why they need to leave. Anyway, back to this javelin man. He followed us back to my house and my friend and I figured, look, either he likes the ladies or he's a bit lonely and he's found people that know he's there. You know, because not everyone that visits these sites has the spiritual or the psychic awareness to know that spirits are at these locations. They just don't. And he stayed with us for about 3 hours. Like, we're sitting there, we had our dinner, we had a cup of tea, and we're just chatting sort of into the night. And he stayed with us until it was bedtime. And we said to him, thanks for your company. It's been really great to come and see you with the jail today. Can you please go back to the jail now? It's our bedtime. So he was fine. He left and I haven't seen him again. But I'm sure if I thought about him hard enough or I went back to the jail, he might just follow me home again. Now, dowsing rods, whether you make your own homemade ones out of a couple of coat hangers or you buy the professional dowsing rods online, They are a really great non-invasive investigation tool. They don't make a sound. There's no flashing lights. They are simply movement-based. And a lot of spirits, right back to convict time, some of them, may understand that dowsing rods were used as water divining tools. And quite often, spirits are happy to touch them or move them. When we were on tour, when I worked as the tour guide, we would ask them to cross the dowsing rods for no and open them for yes. And sometimes fast and sometimes slow, depending on the spirits and their level of ability to interact with tangible objects. So table tipping. Table tipping is another non-invasive spirit communication method that some spirits really enjoy using to communicate. I've used this technique when I was on paranormal tours, and we found that spirit men, women and children like to use this method, and it was an easy way for them to convey yes and no answers to questions, similar to using dowsing rods. They would tip the table, say, to the right for yes and the left for no. And we used a small round wooden topped table, and it had a single wooden stem and 3 wooden feet. And once the spirits understood and practiced mustering up their energy and then laying their hands on top of our hands, they were kind of using our energy. As our hands lay flat on the table, they were putting their hands on top of ours, and quite often you could feel the cool energy. Or they would put their hand on your forearm or sometimes on your elbow. It was just a point of connection to your energy because you're the physical beings sitting at this table. And then they could lift the table slightly in one direction. And when I say lift, it was generally around 1 to 3 centimetres. And it depended on the strength or the ability of the spirits that were using the table. The spirit males at the mental health institution that I used to do the tours at, they loved using this. They really did love it. And you could always tell when men were doing the table tipping because it was more abrupt and it was firm and they were really quite, not forceful. Forceful isn't the right word. It was just very strong energy. When the nurses did this, because the nurses in the nurses' accommodation building that is there at this site, they loved using this method too. And they quite often moved the table very gently around the room. And we'd have to stand up really, really quickly. Oh, it was so funny. We'd have to get out of our seats really quick because the table wanted to move. This building had the old tiled floors, like the old lino floors, and the table would slide very gently along the floor. The men and the women and the children, they would all use the table in a slightly different way, and they could soon adapt their approach. And the kids, they'd wobble it. They'd get underneath it and they'd wobble it around. They'd play under the table like living children would. They weren't great at answering questions, but that's fine. They're having fun with it. Table tipping is a really non-invasive spirit communication method. They really do love it. And we found that it worked well in any rooms that didn't have a carpeted floor. It had to have a fairly smooth floor because you've got to imagine these spirits, they're not in physical bodies and they're draining their energy as they're using our energy to give those energetic bursts to be able to move the table. So the smoother the floor, the easier it moved. And I have to say, it's like any skill. It did take some of them quite a while to master how to do it. And once they understood it, away they went. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of spirits are pre-technology. They just don't like the flashing lights, the noises, the bells, the whistles, the music boxes. They just can't cope with it. And some nights, we had an ovulus, which is a rather complicated technological paranormal investigation device. But one of the selections you could make was for a dictionary. And don't ask me how, but the spirits are able to activate the words. And we would get words come through such as evil, witch, or devil. These would come through either the spirit box, which makes a white noise that the spirits can talk through, or through the ovulus. You would see it written on the screen. And I'd explain to them, this device won't hurt you. We are in the year 2024 and we have this type of technology. And some of them would get it and some of them still wouldn't get it. Now, this is one thing that I've mentioned in other episodes, is that when you are on location, you always ask permission to enter the building. But if you're staying on the site, like I did one night at the old hospital in Queenstown, a nurse's home, and it's been done up as accommodation. The spirits there and the matrons were very specific about you asking permission to enter the rooms. And I found that out one night when I didn't announce myself coming to stay. I just walked in, plonked my stuff on the bed, started laying out my computer, my laptop, all my little paranormal investigation devices and my phone and so forth. That night when I went to bed, I found out the hard way that it's really necessary to announce yourself, how long you're staying, to say hello, be polite. As I was nearly asleep one night, and I'm laughing now because it was funny now but not then, I received the worst electric shocks on my eyelids that I've ever experienced. Now, that's a strange place to give someone an electric shock, but it got my attention. Now, it could have been the annoyed nurse who may have still been residing in that room, or it could have been the matron. She may have gone and told the matron, and the matron's come and like, right, I'm going to let Anna know that she's being disrespectful. But it really woke me up. In more ways than one. I do love puns. It woke me up in more ways than one that you need to be respectful. Whether you're visiting the location, you say hello, you say goodbye, you be polite. But also if you're staying in a I do it in all locations now, I just let spirits and the other entities know that I'm here. I'm going to be here for maybe 2 nights. And if you would like to come and interact, please do. But I did set bedroom boundaries, because otherwise if you say, please come and interact with me, they will be there all through the night, pulling on your blankets. You might have weird dreams. You might feel cold. They're just so funny. I do love them dearly. I really, really do. Now, the other thing too, and I keep saying the other thing, but when you go on paranormal investigations, when you've finished, like I've said, you say goodbye and so forth. But you also ask all of the spirits present to please stay at their location. Because you've been interacting with them, some spirits can be very, very lonely. And I've experienced this, and I've had clients who have experienced this. And these spirits will take a big liking to you, and they will go home with you. They will latch onto you and go home with you. They will follow you everywhere. Because they're lonely. They're not doing it to hurt or harm you. They don't understand how their spirit energy disrupts the functioning of our energy fields and of our physical body in a negative way. They kind of just drain us like batteries. It's what they do. I never say that to them because that's a bit rude. I always word it a little bit more politely. You just need to be aware that if you've had a really great interaction with a spirit, maybe you've got a name, maybe you haven't got a name, you just say, thank you so much for coming out. It's been lovely. It's been really lovely interacting with you tonight. But can you please stay here because I need to go home now and I need to get some sleep. They will honour that request. You just talk to them like normal people because they are normal people. They just don't have the physical bodies. So now let's look at what repels spirits. And I've got 3 main points for you to remember when you're out and about connecting with the spirit realm around us. Now, number 1, I've experienced spirits being repelled by the people using Ouija boards. So think twice about using this type of tool for spirit communication. Now, I know a lot of people love using these boards, but I found that they have detrimental effects on the energy of people's homes or anywhere where they're opened, really, because quite often people don't close them. They don't shut them down afterwards. And I have a friend who uses them and teaches people how to use them respectfully. That's great. That gets the thumbs up from me. But people who are using Ouija boards willy-nilly and not opening them properly or closing them properly or being respectful, you don't know what's going to come through them. I have felt a buzzing, vibrant, spirit-filled room be instantly emptied by the mere showing of a Ouija board. Because spirits, they know what comes through them, and it's not grandma. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to offend anybody. But spirits are vulnerable to dark entity attachment just as much as living people. Now, that's probably another topic for another whole episode of this podcast, so we won't get onto that anymore. Let's look at number 2. Poor manners and being disrespectful in your language, your actions, your body language, the tone of your voice. These are big stoppers for spirit communication. You've got to remember, spirits see what we watch on TV. They see the paranormal investigations, the way that they're run. I mean, a lot of the time they're run on TV for ratings and entertainment. I get that. But if you're doing your own paranormal investigation, like I said before, be you. Have a bit of fun with it. Be respectful. Now, number 3. Lastly, number 3. I find most spirits who want to communicate want to be acknowledged. They want someone to talk with like they did when they were alive. Like I mentioned earlier, spirits are quite often lonely. And in some of the places that we go to, like mental health institutions or old hospitals, spirits don't know they've died. They don't understand. They think they're still living in their own time, in their own reality, doing their own thing. It's just what they tell me. And then all of a sudden they get all these people coming along, and they may have been in their room for the last God knows how many years, and no one's visited, no one's been in to see them, and all of a sudden there's all these people visiting. Remember to be yourself. And don't pretend to be some sort of macho paranormal investigator. They really do dislike fakes, and they will simply choose not to interact with you. Be kind, be respectful, and be yourself. And on that note, I trust that you found this episode interesting and put some of these ideas into practice next time you're out doing some paranormal investigation, or you finally pluck up the courage to do some paranormal investigation, because it can be a bit daunting to start with. You don't know what to do or how to go about it or what sort of equipment to get. I might do another episode on that as well. So in episode 95, you're going to get some insight on how everyday people using their psychic abilities to alert them to the subtle and not so subtle changes in the environment around them. So I've got 3 experiences to share with you to highlight how your body's senses, your developing or already developed psychic awareness and your understanding of the energetic environment around you can actually help you to get on top of a problem or gets out of hand. Like I've got 3 experiences, one of mine, one of Amy's, and one of Claire's. And these 2 ladies are very aware of what goes on in the energetic environment around us. And they got on to seeing an energy clearer to solve their 2 rather strange and unusual and slightly frightening problems as soon as they occurred. So I look forward to seeing you in next week's episode number 95. If you like this spooky content of this episode today, please hit the subscribe button and you will get a notification when every new episode is released to the public. And stay tuned for many, many more episodes unpacking the strange and unseen aspects of the paranormal world around us. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. You can email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.